Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the mountains of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent away, every man to his tent. And Jonathan attacked the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." Now all Israel heard it said that Saul had attacked a garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel had also become an abomination to the Philistines, and the people were called together to Saul at Gilgal. Then the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and encamped in Michmash, to the east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, then the people hid in caves, in thickets, in rocks, in holes, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him, trembling. Then he waited 7 days, according to the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul said, "Bring a burnt offering and peace offerings here to me." And he offered the burnt offering. Now it happened as soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering, that Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him, that he might greet him. And Samuel said, "What have you done?" Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered together at Michmash, then I said, the Philistines will now come down on me at Gilgal, and I have not made supplication to the Lord. Therefore I felt compelled, and offered a burnt offering." And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." Then Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. And Saul numbered the people present with him, about 600 men. Saul, Jonathan his son, and the people present with them remained in Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash. Then raiders came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. 1 company turned onto the road of Ophrah, to the land of Shur. Another company turned to the road of Beth-horon, and another company turned to the road of the border that overlooks the valley of Zeboim, toward the wilderness. Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel. For the Philistines said, "Lest the Hebrews make swords or spears." But all the Israelites would go down to the Philistines to sharpen each man's plowshare, his mattock, his axe, and his sickle. And the charge for sharpening was a pim for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, and the axes, and to set the points of the goads. So it came about on the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan. But they were found with Saul and Jonathan his son. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share together from 1 Samuel chapter 14. Saul has slowly established his kingdom. The opening verse of this chapter is difficult in the Hebrew, so it's not exactly clear how far into Saul's reign we are. But the fact that Jonathan, his son, is leading a division of the army suggests that we're probably at least 10 years into his kingship. And trouble develops when Jonathan attacks the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba. The Philistines are not impressed. They're not impressed that Israel has declared a king, but now Israel has risen up against them. Saul had been declared king, but how was he to establish his kingship? The people had said, "Long live the king," and he had witnessed the challenge that Samuel gave in the previous chapter, where Samuel says that they were to trust the Lord and do the will of the Lord. When Saul was first appointed, he was instructed, "Let it be, when these signs come upon you, that you do as the occasion demands, for God is with you. You shall go down before me to Gilgal, and surely I will come down to you to offer burnt offerings and make sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days you shall wait till I come to you, and show you what you should do." 1 Samuel chapter 10, verses 7 and 8. Saul now finds himself at Gilgal, waiting for Samuel to come. But as he waits, the Philistines have amassed a huge army in response to Jonathan's attack. They are militarily very strong. We find the Israelites did not even have swords among them. Saul and Jonathan had swords, but the rest of the men didn't have swords because the Philistines had not allowed them to have blacksmiths. They were dominating and influencing the children of Israel. And while the children of Israel were at peace under the Philistines, that was okay. But now that the Philistines were threatening, they didn't have the weaponry to fight off the Philistines. And the Philistines had chariots and horsemen, which the Israelites didn't have, as well as infantry. And so the Israelites fled. Some went across the river. Many went up to the hills to hide. And Saul was left with just 600 men. As the people have panicked, so Saul himself begins to panic. He doesn't know his God. As we noted at the beginning, he was not one who walked with God. He hadn't known Samuel before Samuel had appointed him. And now he feels an obligation to call upon the Lord for help, but he doesn't remember that the Lord has said, "Wait 7 days until I come. I will surely come." And so on the 7th day, when Samuel is not there, he takes it upon himself to offer sacrifices to the Lord, as if the sacrifice is going to give them power miraculously over the enemy. People today think that they can do something to influence God. You can't do anything to influence God except be obedient to what he tells you to do. And Samuel does turn up before the end of the day. He turns up in time for the evening sacrifice. But Saul has already offered the sacrifice, and Samuel says, "You've done foolishly. You've not kept the command." There was just one command that Samuel had passed on to Saul: wait 7 days, and you'll be told what to do. But he didn't wait 7 days. He only waited 6 days. On the 7th day he acted rather than waiting on the Lord. It is obvious that Saul is not a man after God's own heart. And Samuel tells him, God has chosen for himself a man. In the short term, this is King David. In the longer term, it is the Lord Jesus Christ, who is a man after God's own heart. The Lord has commanded him to be commander of his people, as we'll read in the book of Daniel chapter 7. But Saul's family will not continue. And the chapter ends with the Philistines coming out to attack the Israelites, and the Israelites cowering before them with no confidence, because Saul has no confidence in the Lord himself.